like I said, hundreds of times, but nobody wants to take the time to figure out how or why. They don't want to realize that the Prussian Model education system, the one thing in your environment that has not changed in over 200 years, did not teach you, and you have not questioned outside of it. Therefore, you will not find it unless you look for yourself. Stop playing the telephone game like you were taught in kindergarten. Stop going to second-hand and third-hand and fourth-hand sources of information like you've been doing for hundreds of years with your media. Go look for yourself.
I don't know if you saw this story, Jeremy, but basically Ron DeSantis tried to take away Disney World's rights of self-governance since they're pushing all the child grooming stuff lately. And Disney World came back and was like, not so fast. We only answer to the crown. And this is just almost hilarious if you know what's going on, because they would never ever admit this unless they were forced to in a situation like this. But they basically admitted, like, you don't have jurisdiction over us because we're owned by Britain. So for those of you who are like confused by this, apparently the land that Disney World is on is owned by the crown. And so since like 1960, Disney World has basically been a tax-free sovereign district, you know, exempt from taxes and anything to do with federal statutes. And they basically claim to just be like an apolitical charity. You know, Disney does a lot of charity work so that they can be tax exempt. Then they started pushing all this woke stuff, and so Ron DeSantis was like, all right guys, you want to get involved in politics? Then let's do politics. We're going to take away your tax exempt status in Florida. But then Disney World came back and pulled out this clause from the British Bill of Rights, which is a royal clause that dates back to like 1692. And it says that essentially Britain has sovereignty over any territory of the crown until the last descendant of King Charles III has passed. And that's the clause Disney World used to keep their tax-exempt status in Florida. And if you know anything about history, then you know that this clause comes from the Magna Carta, which is like the English Bill of Rights. So most people reading this article are probably like, wait, how is Disney avoiding federal tax codes by using an English Bill of Rights clause? But that's because Disney World is technically a territory of the crown, just like Washington, D.C. actually. Most of you know that Washington, D.C. is not actually a state, but a territory, aka a British colony. So, you know, do with that what you will. But this is important for us to know that actually what we tried to escape in England, that whole system of sort of the feudal system of law that they were enslaving everyone under, America was an attempt to escape that and create a truly free country. And so what a lot of, you know, alternative independent historians say is that England could have easily stopped this from happening, but they essentially were like, well, let's just give them the illusion of what they want, and technically we'll still control them and we'll still create the same law structure in that country as we have here.
Hence why,
I don't know if you saw this,
everything in New England, New London, London, New Britain, New Haven, Hartford, Greenwich is verbatim England. Hence why the Star-Spangled Banner, written by a lawyer, if you listen to the words that he's saying, he says the war was over. And even though the war was over, the hundreds of ships behind him were still going to bomb the innocent people if they didn't take down their flag. So because you were told, these brave men, died for the flag, you believe that you won. When the fact of the matter is, you were conquered. And that's why you have the District of Columbia, the capital. That's why these are shipping wars, and you are the product. That's why it takes all this time for you to learn the gold standard was removed, therefore making the bank vault useless. But they told you they were going to protect your gold, which means you were pirated and you were robbed. And all the history, the Prussian Model education system from the 1800s, the one thing in your environment that hasn't changed, never taught you. It makes you obedient. The same thing that happened in the 1900s before the Holocaust. Disconnecting the independent humans from their natural environment. Independent by definition. The farmers, Daniel Shay's rebellion, they were going after the court for a reason. Those people were independent by definition, by the original connotation. The English, one world language, the only language that is not in its original format, which it was derived from. English, England, Greece, Greek, Italian, Italy. They're all in signs and symbols still. And because you were never taught the history, because you don't know what Caring Corrupted documentary, the definition of documentary, killing nurses of the Third Reich, how the Holocaust happened. Because humans were captured, domesticated, made to believe by the Prussian model that they were educated, which means they were artificially educated, removed from their environment, just like removing an elephant from the jungle and putting him in the zoo, where he has no idea the power that he could break out of that zoo, and he acquiesces to a fucking tiny piece of rope. And then, when his keepers, owners, and masters are done using him to make money in the zoo, they can't release him back into the wild because he has no ability, no instincts. They have been removed. He has been bred in captivity in the box and removed all his natural born power and instincts. Fleas in the jar experiment. All the Nazi experiments that have been conducted in order to know how to capture humans, how to manipulate humans. All this history you don't remember, you were not taught, therefore you will be condemned to repeat it. Hence why we're living in the past at least 4 years verbatim Caring Corrupted, Killing Nurses of the Third Reich documentary. Human beings who are no longer independent. Hence why No Farmers, No Food by Epoch Times documentary clearly outlines that when you're a farmer, when you can live off the land, when you don't need fake paper with ink, when you have abilities and skills to survive, you are a sovereign. But when you're a citizen who owes loyalty to the king, to the CEO, to the president of the corporation, and you rely on their legalese and their English definitions that you have not been taught in school, and you don't know anything about the Constitution because you weren't taught it, therefore you believe authority. The very school, the bells, obedience. Go read the book, The Most Dangerous Superstition, and you will understand what I mean about authority. Think of the Wild Wild West when they had a sheriff. And if somebody had a problem because everybody had guns, because everybody was independent by definition, they dealt with it. And nobody got arrested. What does that do in society? Well, then that makes people think before they react. That makes people no longer Paleolithic emotional idiots. It makes them realize there's a consequence to their actions. It makes it so the few corporate interests can't make money off of you housing hundreds of millions of people in jail cells. The people who rebelled. And then you pay 3 square meals to put a roof over their head, medical, gym, memberships, libraries. You house them, and they don't have to work. And you pay for it. But when there was everybody having a gun and everybody being independent, then you didn't have this problem. You didn't have to house or pay. The taxes were created from war. When the war was over, what happened? Did you stop paying them? No. But because you don't know the history, because you don't know who funded these wars, because you weren't taught it, because you won't go look, you'd rather get the dopamine hit from all the posts you put up about bullshit, seeking attention, which the social media platforms were literally designed to do, to take asymmetrical power over your mind, like a fucking voodoo doll. You'll remain feeding them and remain captured, looking for attention, looking for followers, looking for likes, looking for shares. So now you're seeking the attention from others. And keeping you distracted, keeping you in the internet web of things. When you look at the emoji, it's a giant cell, a giant net working like a spider web. That's why it's the web sites. World Wide Web. And they put you in a silk cocoon, a silk cell, through the cellular phone, affecting your cells, your emotions, your lack of intelligence. But until people go look these things up for themselves, stop playing the telephone game, nothing is going to change, because nobody's going to be in the real world looking for independence. Nobody's going to be able to survive if they can only survive on fake paper with ink. There's not a single Walking Dead episode or apocalyptic fucking movie that has ever come out in the history of man where you see the survivors trading gold or silver or any francs or bills or notes. The survivors are the ones who were not disconnected from the natural world. They're the ones who have the abilities, their instincts, the capabilities, the knowledge. That's where the power is. When the elephant has knowledge of his power, he could break out of the cell, the box, the building. It's quite simple.
I don't know if you saw this story, Jeremy.
Importantly, you don't need it. People spend so much time focusing on the dictates of so-called legislators and so much time begging for the ruling class to please be nice to them that they miss the fact that the politicians and their stupid and or evil commands don't matter if the people don't obey. The victims of authoritarian injustice always vastly outnumber those who oppress and abuse them. Always. Tyranny mainly happens not because of the small number of sociopaths who try to rule the world, but because of the masses of well-intentioned people who obey those sociopaths as if they have the right to rule everyone else. To put it another way, the main problem and the solution does not reside in the minds of the demented, power-happy control freaks. It resides in the minds of everybody else. If the people stop viewing criminals as some rightful authority and stop obeying their decrees, the politicians' power evaporates. And that is what has to happen to stop this. Not votes, not petitions, not protests, not political campaigns. Disobedience and resistance. If you will only live as a free human being when politicians tell you you're allowed to, then you are a slave forever. If you still think you need legislative permission to live your own life and make your own choices, then you're already doomed. As Stephen Biko put it, the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressor is the mind of the oppressed. And if you still feel an obligation to obey whatever arbitrary crap the political crooks decide to call law, then you are the one enriching and empowering these psychos. You are the one cooperating with and enabling this injustice. If you still take pride in being a law-abiding taxpayer, which literally means that you are proud to blindly obey the oppressive dictates of sociopaths and proud to fund their heinous machine, then you are the problem. If you really want to be part of the solution, you need to back your brain out of the authoritarian indoctrination it's been dragged through your whole life and realize that in a time of widespread institutionalized injustice, law and authority are always on the side of evil. And those on the side of righteousness are always considered criminals by the psychopaths who demand their obedience. So if you want to see freedom and justice prevail, then learn to be a criminal. Learn how to disobey destructive and immoral commands, even when those commands are called law. Learn how to trust your own soul and your own conscience and put what you know is right above what the parasites say is legal. Stop waiting for and begging for a political solution. There is none and never will be. And when you demand freedom Actually demand it. That doesn't mean making a pathetic request to the very people who rob and abuse you. It doesn't mean protests and voting. It means disobeying, and it means resisting by any means necessary. Let me end here with a quote from Frederick Douglass. Quote, "If there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet deprecate agitation are men who want crops without plowing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, and it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Find out just what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong which will be imposed upon them. And these will continue till they are resisted with either words or blows or with both. The limits of tyrants are prescribed by the endurance of those whom they oppress." End quote. If you actually believe in freedom and justice, stop asking nicely for it. Go make it happen.
The greatest form of control is where you think you're free when you're being fundamentally manipulated and dictated to. One form of dictatorship is being in a prison cell and you can see the bars and touch it. The other one is sitting in a prison cell but you can't see the bar, you think you're free. What the human race is suffering from is mass hypnosis. We are being hypnotized by people like this. Newsreaders, politicians, teachers, lecturers. We are in a country and in a world that is being run by unbelievably sick people. The chasm between what we're told is going on and what is really going on is absolutely enormous.
It's like we all know what's going down, but no one's saying shit what happened to the home of the brave. These motherfuckers, they controlling us now, and no one's talking about how they made us fight and be slaves. And everybody's just walking around, head in the clouds, and wanna wake up to a dead in the grave. But then it's too late, we need to be ready to raise up.
Well, it's the end of an empire.
Yes.
And, there's this guy, Douglas Murray, he's this English, British intellectual, and he said that every time a civilization is close to collapsing, they become obsessed with gender. It happened with the ancient Greeks, the Romans. It's just